The word gospel, thank you for coming up, incidentally. The word gospel is a word in Greek that literally means good news. Sometimes people don't act that way. We come all solemn into church and we don't smile or seem to be very happy. But the gospel is good news, and that good news is God so loved the world, not that he wanted to punish people, but that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. What a wonderful thing it is. And yet, Jesus starts out this Sermon on the Mount telling people how to be happy, because Jesus' gospel is good news. And what is that good news? The love of God. But then he says something about how to be happy, and it's absolutely stunning what he says. He says, happy are the poor. You want to be happy, be poor, it sounds like. Happy are those who are hungry. Are you happy when you're hungry? Happy are you when you weep, says Jesus. Happy are you when people hate you for the sake of the gospel. That's really shocking, isn't it, really? Just about everything that we want. We want to be rich. We want to have good food stuffing our little tummies. We want to be able to laugh. We want people to be able to love us. We want to be popular and to be liked. And yet, Jesus says quite the opposite. You know, I'm sure that many of you feel as I do. I must confess that when there was the first debate between the two presidential candidates, I ended up halfway through it turning it off when I listened to people insulting each other. And then I didn't watch the second or third debates, and I must confess that I found the anger and the hatred and the name-calling of the candidates against each other as something I just hated it. I hated to turn on the news to hear any more about the candidates and that sort of thing. I don't know how you feel about it, but when people are insulting each other and calling each other names, and they think instead of really telling what the issues are, they are spreading hatred and anger and that sort of thing. I just find it impossible to listen to the news. And there are people also who say that they are fed up on that sort of thing. But you know, there are some amazing things in what Jesus says about happiness. What in the world can he mean when he says, happy are those who are hungry, happy are those who are poor, happy are those who weep, happy are those who are disliked? I think that Jesus is saying that the real happiness in life isn't what it looks like. Being rich, being full of wonderful food, being in happy entertainment. But happiness consists of being close to God and following Christ and trusting in him. What a wonderful, wonderful way to live. But, I'd like to especially talk about in the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, what is called the Golden Rule. Do for others just what you want them to do for you. The wonderful thing about that is that Jesus is saying, if you think about other people and how they'd want to be treated, and you treat them the same way, that isn't an easy thing, because it demands of you that you try to understand how other people feel, what they would like in their lives, and then you to follow that example. I think that there are an awful lot of us who need to really try to walk in the footsteps of others in trying to think, what do other people want? How would they like to be treated? As a pastor, I would often times have people come to me and they'd tell about their problems and that, and sometimes I'd give them a lot of advice. And I found myself doing that with my wife, too. My wife would open up to me and she'd tell something that was bothering her. And of course, with my superior insight and all knowledge of how problems can be solved, I'd start preaching to my wife a sermon and telling her what she needed to do, or what she needed to start doing, or what she needed to stop doing. And finally, one time, my wife really let me have it. She said, "Did it ever occur to you that when I started telling you problems in my life, I wasn't asking for you to preach a sermon to me, but to shut up and listen to me?" Well, it took me a while to learn that. I'm a slow learner, but finally I got to the place where I realized that people don't really need advice most of the time. They already know what they should be doing, and that's true of how you talk to your parents and how parents talk to their kids. In our frustration, we preach to them instead of trying to get into the mind and the desires of our children or our parents or our friends. Do to others what you would like them to do for you. And we really need to seek to get into that, the desires of other people. I remember I had a next door neighbor who was, I guess I'd have to say, a sports fanatic. He was involved in every sport you could imagine. He was a fanatic in bowling, in playing baseball in the summer, and getting together with friends and doing some football in the fall of the year, skiing, all sorts of things. He'd spend hours and hours entertaining himself, and then watching TV when he wasn't participating in a sport. He was out in front of the TV watching that. Finally, his wife came to the conclusion that she was a sports widow, a TV widow, and just about every kind of widow there was. And she had it. She went to her husband one day and she said, "I'm going to a lawyer to sue for a divorce." And her husband was absolutely shocked. He thought they had a successful marriage, that his wife was very happy. How could she not be happy with such an enthusiast in sports? Well, actually, he was more tender-hearted than his wife expected. He started to weep. He started crying. He started pleading with his wife. He said he'd give up watching so much on TV. He'd give up participating in so many sports. Not all of it, but to give up some and spend more time with his wife. The point was, the husband, in his excitement and enthusiasm for sports, had not really recognized and realized what his fanaticism was doing to their marriage and so forth. I think that every one of us need to walk in the footsteps of our people of our family, people of the church, and that sort of thing. I think that we need to look at what's going on in the lives of the church and look at our participation in that. For instance, I remember hearing a guy in the church. He wasn't very active in the church. And he said, well, I'm just as good a member of the church as anybody else. And apparently he had a friend who was rather blunt in his accusations, and the friend said, let me tell you, he said, I happen to be the treasurer of the church and keep a record, of course, of all the giving. He said, if everybody in the church was giving like you give, the church would be broke. And the man was flabbergasted and shocked. The man went on, if everyone in the church attended as often as you attend, the church would shut down because of lack of attenders. He said that if everybody would volunteer for tasks in the church like you do, the church would be having no entertainment or any activities outside of the church on Sunday morning. He said, if everybody in the church greeted visitors like you visit and greet people, he said, there'd be no one who'd come back a second time. You know, I got to give this congregation a real compliment. When I was called by your pastor to preach back a few months ago for the first time, I decided, well, I ought to go to the church and see what the worship service is like so I don't botch up too badly. And I came to church on a Sunday morning. Nobody knew who I was. I was just a stranger who happened to stop in at church. But people came up to me and greeted me and shook my hand and talked to me and asked questions and made me feel warm. And there were even people who not only shook my hand, but hugged me and greeted me. And I thought, my goodness, this sure is a friendly congregation. So apparently here, at least, there are some people who recognize that the importance of being friendly and greeting people. I really have been impressed with this church. I quite often go on Wednesday night, almost every Wednesday night, and it's so really thrilling to find the warmth and the friendship of this congregation. What would this church really be like if everyone who belonged participated like you do? That's what shocked me about when one of the candidates for president was accused of not paying any taxes for the last so many years. He said, "Who wants to pay taxes? Really, I'm smart because I don't pay any taxes." And I thought to myself, what about if everyone felt the same way about paying taxes? Or do we pay taxes simply because we know we should, and as a Christian we would pay our taxes? What would our nation be like? How strong would it be if everyone were like you when it comes to the support of our nation? We sing, "God bless America," but does our life bless America the way we live it as well, too? Well, it's going to be Thanksgiving in a few weeks, and I think we need to recognize that the way of Thanksgiving and giving thanks and giving ourselves and our substance to other people is a way to happiness. But you know, I remember one guy who was completely complaining about people. He was unhappy. He had felt that the world had passed him by as far as joy went. And this pastor, a well-known pastor, he's passed away now, Norman Vincent Peale, got out a piece of paper and he said, "On this side, I want you to write down all the things that you really like about life, that have really helped you and made you happy. Then on the other side, write down all the things that make you irritated and make you unhappy." And the man couldn't figure anything out to put down on the happy side. He just simply was a miserable creature. And then Dr. Peale said to him, "Well, do you have anything that you are happy about?" "No, nothing." He said, "Well, you're married. I take it you're miserable in your marriage." "Well, no, I think I have a good marriage." "Well, that's one thing that you can put down on the happy side. You have a job?" "Well, of course I have a job." "Well, aren't you glad when so many people are unemployed that you got a job?" "Well, yes, I am grateful that with so many unemployed people, I have a good job." And he went on and on. "Do you have decent health?" "Yeah, I have that." "Your eyes work okay?" "Yeah." "Your arthritis isn't too bad?" No, I have an ache and pain once in a while, but I do pretty well." And Dr. Peale said, "Okay, then do a favor for me. Take this sheet of paper home, and on the one side write, what are the things that in life that make me happy? And on the other side, write down, what are the things in life that make me sad and irritated?" And the man left, and Dr. Peale said, "I'll never hear from him again." But a few months later, he got a letter from this fellow saying that writing down the blessings that he had in life really was life-changing. "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name, and forget not all his benefits." You know, as my father got older and older, his health declined, and he really wasn't living a very happy life. And so I wrote him a letter, and in this letter, I told him all the things that I felt he had passed on to me in life that were good. And I never heard from my dad about that letter, But my mother called me one day and she said, you know, your dad read that letter and he carries that letter around with him all the time now. And he talks and tells it to friends and that. He has been thrilled and he's become a new person, even though in his old age he isn't in terribly good health. He is so thrilled by that. And he reads that letter to his friends. Well, I never dreamt that it would have any effect on my dad. But when we tell our neighbors, when we tell our friends, when we tell our parents what we think. Have any of you young people have thought about really telling your parents what you like about them? Have you parents taken the time to really make a list of things that you like about your children? Do to others what you'd want them to do to you. It's a wonderful thing when you learn how to compliment people, how to encourage people, how to comfort people. It's the way Jesus lived. And if we're following him, then we should be making life a more beautiful thing for those who know us. Amen.